If the Cowboys are going to make the playoffs this year, they're going to need CeeDee Lamb, Micah Parsons, and Dak Prescott to have the best years of their careers. We'll explain why next.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. And on today's show, we're going to answer your Twitter questions, including our expectations for Cooper Beebe in year 2. Who is the backup kick returner, punt returner behind Kevontae Turpin? We'll get into that. But this first question comes from Evan, a longtime listener of the show. He wants to know, what do the superstars in this team need to do this year to take the next step? Dak, CeeDee, Micah, etc.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, right? Like, I mean, I think there's high expectations on guys kind of returning to form, but it is good to kind of set specific expectations, right? And I think something close to where we saw I guess let's start with CeeDee Lamb. Okay, I think something close to what we saw with him in 2023 would be good numbers to something around the area of 1,800 yards. But I mean, I'd like to see him do that with a few less targets, which is a huge order. But I think that's the next step. Like, I think what we saw last year with CeeDee Lamb is he took enormous steps as being a leader and like setting an example and being kind of like growing as a professional football player. It felt like, right? Fighting through injury. It was a tough season, but he showed up week in and week out. And I think that, that hasn't really been a problem with his production, but seeing him perform like that, I think is going to provide him. I think what we're seeing is that play out with Pickens now, is that now he understands like what's on the line, that not every year is guaranteed. What he needs to be a leader. So him showing some leadership elements, taking Pickens under his arm, I think that's another big step for him as well. I think for Dak, we know what Dak needs to do. He needs to play well in big games now that he's got the pieces around him to do so, right? Like, I think it's about leaning into the pieces around him and leading them and getting the run game going, doing his part to help the run game going by getting him into the right play, obviously working in the passing game to create space for the run game. And then when it becomes time to really play the more difficult teams later in the season, especially as you get into the playoffs, understanding that you have these guys around you for a reason and not pressing and relying on your superstars and trusting your superstars that are around you to kind of make the plays necessary. And then finally for Parsons, I think it's kind of a weird combination of all these things. Like, he's been consistently productive his entire young career. I think what we saw as well with him last year with Dak gone was both him and CeeDee becoming leaders, right, on their respective sides of the ball. And now especially it just feels like Micah is the leader, unquestionably, of that defense. So I think on that, the off-field side, I think you've seen him to kind of take that step as the leader. So we'll just want to see him continue to grow there. And then on the field, continue to just be a very high dominant pass rusher while adding more to being a solid run defender, because I think that's, the book on Parsons is that him and the Cowboys, that if you can just run all over them, they won't get to the opportunities for Micah to pin his ear back and get your quarterback. Micah has to be part of the solution to getting them into third down and long so that he can rush the passer better.
I also think it could be just as simple as stay on the field. In 2023, these three players missed a combined 0 games. In 2024, you had Dak missed 9 games, Micah missed 4 games, and I think CeeDee Lamb missed the final 2 games of the year, if I'm not mistaken. They just don't have the depth that maybe they had in 2021, 22, 23 to survive any long-term absences here. So I think the most important thing is stay on the field. And if those three players can play to their career averages, right? Like if
Yeah.
CeeDee Lamb plays like he did in 2024, 2022, they're going to be fine. If Micah plays the way that he's played his entire career, they're going to be fine. If Dak Prescott can play 16, 17 games and just play at the level that we've seen him play for most of his career, they will be a playoff team. So I don't necessarily think that any of these players need to take a step up or level up. Just be available, because I think that's the most important thing here.
Yeah, for sure. Availability is the most important ability, right?
Or
Um,
it's the truth.
yeah, no, for sure. And absolutely is the truth. And I think that's all it would take probably to get to the playoffs. If you want to start
Yes.
looking at taking the next steps, I think what we laid out is also like what they need to do for them to take a step beyond where they've been before.
Well, and I will also say, I think if the Cowboys, you're right, if those guys stay healthy, I think they will make the playoffs. But if they want to get to the divisional round, the championship round, and the Super Bowl, they probably need another player to get into that same level as those three guys.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think it can't be Tyler Smith. I mean, obviously, we want Tyler Smith to have an all-pro caliber season, although I don't even know what that means anymore after Thursday. It needs to be somebody else at like a money 5 position, whether that's, another defensive end. If it's Deron Bland, like I think that's one of the best possible outcomes. If Bland ends up becoming that guy that's in the same tier as those, and now you have 4, cornerstones on your franchise, I think that's what they need. I just don't know who's the closest to joining that trio of players.
I think what's more than likely than them adding one of those kind of cornerstone players is adding 3 or 4 players to that tier beneath the cornerstone
Sure.
players. Like,
Sure.
and I think that could, ostensibly do the same thing, right? Like where if you had like a step up in level from, let's say, Osa Digizua, Jake Ferguson,
Yeah.
and
Maris Leafau,
main
right?
linebacker. Yeah, exactly. I think that would have like a very similar effect of providing
Sure.
the amount of talent, superstar talent. And I think that's the angle that the Cowboys are more going for, is like, hey, we've got our S tier players. What we need is more excellent guys to kind of support them. We've got maybe 2 or 3. We would like to have 5 or 6, and then that would really kind of lift the talent where it needs to be to compete.
And I think if you look at like the Eagles last year, the Eagles had their core S players, right? Like AJ Brown, Saquon Barkley, Lane Johnson. You know the names, right?
Yeah.
But I think it was the fact that like someone like Zach Bond, who they signed as an unrestricted free agent for like $3 million a year, had an all-pro season, one of the best defensive players in the league. And now that's suddenly just somebody out of nowhere that became a big-time player. I don't think they need to have that caliber to necessarily get to the next level, but a couple of those guys that, like Deron Bland in 2023,
Yeah.
like we did not think Deron Bland was going to be an all-pro player in 2023.
Yeah, and he doesn't need to break the pick 6 record.
No,
just
of course
go
not.
just come out here and be like an extremely high level player that we've seen him play at. And then you just need like 1 or 2 of these other guys who you've been kind of waiting to break out to kind of break out, and then suddenly you're where you need to be.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about Cooper Beebe, because Pro Football Focus just had a very disrespectful ranking of Beebe. Not really, but let's talk about it next. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Have you ever checked your bank account and wondered, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. But that's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, all of your investments, and your spending in one place, so you can stop managing your money and start building your wealth. We've been using Monarch Money for several months now, and I've realized how much money I was spending on food delivery, coffee runs. It's really bad that a new coffee shop opened up by my house, but now I am budgeting smarter and I am saving more. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That is monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. On next week's shows, we're going to break down the Cowboys' mandatory minicamp, so make sure you guys tune in for that. But Landon, let's get to more questions, and this one comes from Ryan Trammell. He wants to know, what are your expectations for Cooper Beebe, the Cowboys' second-year center in 2025 and beyond?
I mean, I have big expectations for Cooper Beebe. I do think, you mentioned in the tease last segment of him being 16th or him being disrespectful. And I do think it's disrespectful because I don't think people are taking into account the talent and taking into account the kind of situation that he's being put into at this point, right? Like now you've got his college coach coming in to be his pro coach, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's comfortable with a year under his belt playing center. So he's not learning to play center going into this training camp or this offseason. He knows he's the established center. He's got now another first rounder to his right to match the all pro. And I mean, am I using this wrong? I want to make sure I got
you
this
are
right.
In this case, but that's fine.
Yeah,
I'm okay with
that's
it.
Fun. A very, very, very good offensive guard.
All pro caliber guard. How about that?
All pro caliber for sure. We could say that, right? On his other side, I think that Cooper Beebe's in for a very big year. I think that, he is the kind of more, in style of center that is becoming more in phase where he's a bigger guy that's playing the position, and he's got two bigger guards next to him.
Mm-hmm.
I think if the Cowboys are going to go far, and they're going to go on the backs, honestly, of how well this three are able to dominate the line of scrimmage, because I do think it's going to open things up for the rest of this offense in a way that's really, really important. I have very big expectations for Cooper Beebe, and I think people aren't accounting for all the things that are happening around specifically him that are setting him up for a really big season.
Yeah, and don't forget, when Cooper Beebe was playing at Kansas State, not only was he not playing center, I mean, he was snapping the ball some in practice, and that was in Dane Brugler's notes, but he was a left tackle, and he played both left guard and right guard. So now he didn't know that he was going to be a center in the NFL until the Cowboys drafted him. And even then, like, we saw the videos of him snapping in the backyard. I think it was to his mom, right?
To his mom, yeah.
That was in May, right?
Yeah.
So he only had a few months to get ready to be an NFL center. It took him a couple months to get going, but as Pro Football Focus noted, in the second half of the year, he was a top 10 graded center in the league. I think that reason alone, having a full off season to know that you're going to be a center, and the additions that they made in the coaching staff and the players, I think should help. The other thing that I wanted to point out really quickly is that I think the scheme change could do wonders for him, not just him, but also Tyler Smith. PFF had a note this week that Tyler Smith was the highest graded gap guard in the league last year on running plays. And you look at Cooper Beebe's numbers, like by run blocking type, he was fantastic on inside zone, man, gap, all that kind of stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if this scheme just fits those players significantly better.
Yeah, and I think, it kind of goes back to why we are, or at least why I am enjoying a lot of what's happening in the offseason, because it all matches up, right? Like the guard and the center and the other guard, they all kind of do the same thing well. And that all happens to be the thing that the offensive coordinator seems to be good at calling. So there's a lot of synchronicity happening in on the offensive side of the ball that it felt like maybe there hadn't been previously. So yeah, and Beebe is a huge part of that. He's literally in the middle of it. So I do think that it's all the things, right? It's the scheme change. It's the familiarity with the coaches. It's the year removed from position switch. It's the year 2 bump that usually these players get. It's the caliber of the guys that are on either side of them. The fact that all three of them kind of physically match well, and then the fact that all three of them physically do the same kind of things on the football field well together. Yeah, there's just a lot of, positive things happening for Cooper Beebe, indicators, right? Pointing that, hey, this is all going in one direction. If Beebe's going to have a good season, it's going to be in a situation like this where everything is pointing in the same direction.
And again, I don't want PFF grades to be the end all be all, but we saw
not.
something similar happen with Tyler Biadasz going from year 1 to year 2. If you just look at his grades, 57.9 as a rookie, 69.7 in 2021. He was a top 8 graded center in football. Not all progression is linear in the NFL. However, in the case of Cooper Beebe, I would be shocked if he wasn't noticeably better this year.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think seriously, I do expect him to take a very large step because every single thing that we see, he's got kind of supporting him, and he's an incredible hard worker who loves to play the game, which is not unlike most of the guys on the team, it feels like. But yeah, I just think that progression's not always linear. You never know how it's going to happen.
No.
But I do think that it's based a lot on the fact that he had a lot of things going on this year, and this year it's all very clear how it's supposed to go, and he's got the support that around him that he didn't have necessarily last year. So yeah, if he could get through last year playing the way he did, I'm excited to see what he can do with this.
Think about Tyler Smith, how big of a step he made from year 1 to year 2 with the Cowboys. Now he went from left tackle to left guard, but you could just see the confidence was there. And speaking of Tyler Smith, I think the scheme change is really going to help. He's only 24. And now he's going to have the same starters on both sides of him for the first time of his career, right? We'll see how much better Tyler Guyton is, but he knows the two guys that are going to be playing next to him. I would expect Tyler Smith to have the best year of his career as well. There's a lot of uncertainty on this offensive line. I think the tackles still give me the heebie-jeebies a little bit, but I think Tyler Smith is one of the things that we can count on having a Pro Bowl, all-pro caliber season.
I think there's a lot of other positions where there's a lot of uncertainty and you're not exactly sure the direction of how things are going to go. But the reason we feel this way about these players in the offensive line is because the Cowboys have invested a lot. We just laid it out. Not just a first round pick. They've changed their whole coaching staff. They changed their whole offensive philosophy. And most of it was to better support the offensive line. So that's why we're kind of bullish on this situation, is because the Cowboys have very much invested in making this group a better group next season. Yeah. So if it doesn't get better, there's definitely questions to be answered.
Well, if it doesn't get better, I can tell you that the Cowboys will not be in the playoffs this year. Like they are,
for sure.
They are relying on this offensive line across the board to be better. And you mentioned they've dumped a significant amount of resources into it. They're one of the only teams in the NFL that has a former offensive line coach as their offensive coordinator. That is extremely rare. But it shows you the emphasis they're putting on that position.
Absolutely. And that's why, even though you've got a guy that's obviously coming in here known for throwing the football as a quarterback and a passing game coordinator, they clearly were very, very serious about being a serious run team just based on all the investments they made, like I said, all over the place, at coaching, at personnel, philosophy, everything.
All right, let's talk about the special teams unit, because there's a lot of change in that on that side of the ball as well, with a new special teams coordinator. But who's going to be the backup kick returner behind Kevontae Turpin? We will get to that next. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Scouting Show. As training camps get closer and moves are being made, host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. All right, Landon, let's get to this question from JJ. He wants to know, who would be the special teams returners if Turpin were to go down for any period, or if they decide he's too valuable on offense? That's happened before multiple times in NFL history, where a receiver is a fantastic returner, and then he gets too good on offense to be used on special teams. I'm thinking of like Wes Welker, Julian Edelman, Tyreek Hill. Now, wouldn't that be something if Turpin turned into one of those guys? But even if he's healthy, who is the second man with Turpin on kick returns?
So we got to think about, they've changed the kickoff return and kickoff rules, right? It's kind of different personnel than what we would traditionally think about. I think that it's likely that you would get maybe a little bit of a bigger body returning kicks. Maybe someone like a running back, that instead of a water bug wide receiver type. Though I do think that. Well, yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I'm just trying to get my guys some more jobs, right?
Yeah.
No, I'm thinking I think Miles Sanders has some experience returning kicks, if I'm not mistaken. I think he did it with Carolina a little bit last year, and I know he did it with the Eagles at some point. So I would look at that. I don't know if Williams has any experience, but I don't think he has the kind of skill set necessarily would look for. But listen. Jaden Blue is probably the first guy that I would look at if he's. I think he did some returning, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah. I mean, certainly, obviously, just by what you see on paper, you would view him as a really great opportunity guy for this because again, he's not the 225-pound running back, but he's a bigger guy when it comes to return guys. In that situation, 200 pounds probably. So yeah, I think Jaden Blue would be first on my list, and then Miles Sanders probably backing him up.
Yeah, I think they have a lot of options. I'll give you another name that we should mention. If Wanye Thomas isn't going to be one of your starting two safeties, he's got experience doing it as well. And again, I don't think he's not your first guy in your depth chart, but he's a guy that could fill in if you need him to, right? If Turpin goes down with a sprained ankle midway through a game, I wouldn't be surprised if he's an option.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, any of these kind of bigger body guys that are 200 around 200 pounds that have experience with the ball in their hands. A lot of these, I was looking at these defensive guys too. Like a lot of them have experience returning kicks, and so this is different than catching a pass. Like these guys, some of these guys have a lot of experience doing that stuff, and some of them were running backs in college and that sort of thing. So you look for guys that have experience with the ball in their hands. And obviously, you're not going to force somebody on the team to be the backup kick returner. So it's not like Deuce Vaughn would make a lot of sense, but I don't know if Deuce Vaughn's going to be active on the game day roster. So it's more about finding guys that are already on your roster that can do it.
Now, punt returning is a little different because that's a very unique skill. I think Wanye Thomas has some experience, but honestly, if Turpin goes down, do you know who they would probably put back there? Let me ask you this question. Do you know who has the most experience returning punts outside of Kevontae Turpin?
Is it CeeDee?
Yeah, it's CeeDee. CeeDee did it a bunch at Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Now, here's my thing.
The Dez thing, right?
But I also highly doubt, if CeeDee's in the game, he's basically like Patrick Creighton. He's just going to fair catch anything.
That's actually what I meant is that they're making go out there and fair catch it
which is fine, right? You can do that. You can, if you need to get it through a game, you can have him out there, just fair catch anything. But I also kind of looking at this roster in the depth chart, I wouldn't be surprised if they go out and try to find a backup returner somewhere. And maybe they don't force him onto the roster, but they pretty clearly need somebody else here.
Yeah, I mean, I think they have to. They'll try everybody out in training camp and then see if they. I mean, I think obviously they would love to have somebody in house that would solve that problem. But if it's just absolutely not there, then you can go out there and find somebody if you need to, stash them on your practice squad. Maybe one of these rookie undrafted free agent tryout guys, honestly, that has experience doing this kind of thing.
And even they lost Jordan Lewis this offseason. Lewis is one of those guys who has had lots of practice. So maybe they'll put him on the practice squad. And maybe this is where someone like Jalen Cropper, who, I guess has looked good during OTAs. I don't know. I just ignore any of these undrafted receivers at this point. But I wouldn't be surprised if he's on the practice squad, but he's your primary backup kick returner.
I got a name.
Go ahead.
What about Micah Parsons? He would want. He wants to. He would be the first. If Turpin gets hurt, he's the first person.
I know.
It's Sorenson's ear going, hey, buddy, hey, you think I can get out there and
I'm sure he would like to work that into his new contract. Hey, if I'm returning kicks, I need a little bit more money. Yeah. I don't think just with the special teams in general, how do you feel about that unit going into the year without Bones Fossil, with Nick Sorenson running that group?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, right? Because it's like, I really liked what Bones was doing. I really wanted them to kind of bring him back because it was creative and he was doing different things and he was interested in it. I think with Sorensen, it's more just going to be about being efficient and solid. And the truth of the matter is that you've already got your punter and kicker and snapper and holder in place,
Yeah.
So as far as the personnel goes, and frankly, you've also brought back, your kind of top guys too, your top special teams guys, your gunners and stuff. So it's going to look very similar, I would imagine. And in fact, I wouldn't be shocked if Sorensen in a lot of ways was leaned on the Cowboys personnel a little bit to be like, hey, what'd you guys do last year? So we can kind of just do something similar, because he's come, you have to think about it. Sorensen hasn't been a special teams coordinator since they've changed the rules on the kickoff and the kickoff return. So, he's still learning that kind of, he's obviously been a part of it as the defense coordinator of San Francisco, but he's been watching it from afar, not studying it. So I think he's probably going to lean heavily on the kind of experienced veterans here to see what's worked and what hasn't. But I do think that one thing that you're going to be sure of is that, he's going to be able to get in there and help guys concentrate on their tackling, making sure that they've got that. That's the thing that I think that I don't worry about, that, you can worry about with some of these special teams coaches. Maybe it won't be as creative, but I don't think that there's going to be any kind of big lapses in lane integrity in the kickoff, or, missing tackles at high speed, or, I think Sorensen will be good for making sure the tackles get made in special teams situations.
All I want to know is what type of players does Sorensen prefer on the special teams unit? Does he want smaller, faster guys? Does he want more defensive players who are used to tackling? That's what I'm interested in seeing, and I'm sure we'll get a glimpse of that once training camps start. That's it for today's show. We'd like to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Check out the channel on YouTube. Download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and we will see you right back here on Monday.